Hello. This is my Wednesday night Bible study on Tuesdays. Just one Tuesday. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is July 25th. We are studying the book of John, going all the way through the book of John. We're in John chapter 20, just one chapter to go. But it's kind of all the stuff that John was leading to. It's like, because Jesus has been resurrected for 30, 40 years now, when John finally wrote this. And so there's things he's wanting to set the record straight on. So he put a lot of detail in these last two chapters. So in John chapter 20, last week we focused on Mary Magdalene and her story. This week we're going to focus on Peter. What happened to Peter? It's kind of interesting. So reminding ourselves of where we ended last week, in John chapter 20, verse 17, it says, Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me." Oh, so let's just review. Mary Magdalene gets there by herself and she meets the other women. She came a different route than they did, and she met Joanna and two different Marys and all different, Salome. They're all there. All the women who were supporting Jesus' ministry. He was supported by rich women because the disciples weren't working anymore. So anyway, they all met. They were going to properly clean Jesus' body and prepare it for the proper burial because everything had to be done so fast. He was taken down from the cross so quick because it was already Passover. He died right before Passover night. And so they had to take his body down, bury him, and everybody ran off. And now 3 days later, they're finally able to take care of his body in the proper way. They get to the tomb. There's an angel sitting on top of the stone that has been rolled away. Mary doesn't see the angel, Mary Magdalene. She just sees that the stone has been rolled away, and she goes, "That's not good." She was going to ask the Roman soldiers to do it. They're all laying flat on the ground, so obviously in her mind, somebody knocked them all out, and they rolled the stone away, and she runs away because she's expecting the worst. They've done a horrible thing. The women stay, the other women stay, and they look inside, and there are two angels that talk to them and say, "He's risen, and go tell the disciples." So Mary Magdalene tells the disciples, and I'm going to distinguish between the apostles and the disciples, because there are 70 disciples. There's 70, men and women. But there are 11 chosen apostles left. So Mary Magdalene gets to them, tells them separately, because John is at his house, Peter's at his house, they're all in different places, what's happening. They kind of gather, like, oh my goodness, his body's missing. That's all she knows. She didn't hear from the angel. So his body's missing. Then the women show up, and they're able to talk to more of them and tell them about an angel. Now, they don't believe them. An angel appeared. You're crazy. Peter and John don't even hear about an angel. They just leave as soon as Mary tells them they've stolen his body. So Peter and John, who are in separate places, they run to the tomb. They kind of meet up in the middle and run together. John gets there first. He wants everybody to know, I got there first. He's a little bit younger than Peter. Peter gets there after, but he goes on and into the tomb. John just looks down because you step down into the tomb. Peter goes inside. He sees the bedclothes. But the body's not there. There's no angel. The angel appeared to the women. The angel disappeared now. I don't want you to see us. And so Peter and John leave with two different impressions of what has happened. John thinks, ooh, a miracle, he rose. And Peter's like, oh, Lord, they took his body. He's thinking the worst. And that, not that he's crazy. Well, they're all a little crazy because Jesus told them over and over, I'm going to rise from the dead. But they couldn't fathom it. Even though on purpose he had done that Lazarus thing, on purpose, because he could have gotten there when Lazarus was first taken ill, but Jesus waited until Lazarus was dead, waited until it had been a couple of days, waited to make sure that 3 days had happened, because they believed your body just kind of hovered, your spirit hovered around your body, but after 3 days you were dead. Because some people went in the coma, some people, were unconscious. And so in their minds, you might come back to life. But after 3 days, you just, okay, this person is dead. So he waited all that long for them. So they could see someone rise from the dead, so it wouldn't be so impossible in their brains. It was still impossible in their brains, bless their hearts. So Peter and John leave. Mary Magdalene goes back because she's trying to gather some information. In fact, she gets there. Now, she sees the two angels, and the angels say that he's not here, but she doesn't think that they're angels because they don't say, "Hey, we're angels." So she didn't run into the other women. So she only knows what she knows. The stone was rolled away. Now, had she seen an angel sitting on top of the rock, she might have thought, well, that's got to be an angel to get up there. But she just sees two men on the inside. Oh, where have they taken him? Oh, and before they can really answer her good, she sees Jesus. She turns and hears Jesus, thinks it's the gardener. They've taken him, and I don't know where they've laid him, and I'm so upset, right? And that's when he says her name. And nobody says your name like Jesus says your name. And so, he knows my name, right? And that's when she realized it's actually Jesus. And she's ready to grab him. And he says, don't cling to me yet. I haven't gone to the Father yet. And we have to do everything officially as God laid it out. And you couldn't touch the priest before he went in to put his blood on the mercy seat. So don't do that. I went down. I preached to the spirits that were in prison, Moses and Abraham and all of them, showed myself to them. I'm who they've been waiting for. They're all excited. I'm about to leave captivity. I'm about to lead them all up into the presence of God. But first, I'm going to go to the mercy seat. So I'll be back. Now, Peter and John know nothing of any of that. Saw no angels, didn't know Mary Magdalene talked to Jesus. So we're kind of starting there. So in John chapter 20, verse 17, it says, Jesus said to her, do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father, but do go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. So he's no longer just my Father, he's your Father. He's no longer my God, he's your God. We have the same relationship now. Again, we're not Jesus. We're not on his level. Jesus is God. But he's symbolically the first of many brethren, the Bible says, so that we all can call him Abba Father. Now we can all just go to him, and because Jesus has made the way. So in verse 18, Mary Magdalene came and he told the disciples that she had seen the Lord and that she'd spoken these things, and that he'd spoken these things to her. They still don't know if they believe her. Now, in between verse 18 and verse 19, some other events happen. John doesn't bring them up because he says, well, you already read them in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And people have been reading these books over and over and over and over and over. So he's bringing up the stuff that nobody knows about that Matthew, Mark, and Luke left out. So he now leaves out these events, but I just want to put everything in because it's easier to understand in chronological order. So in Matthew chapter 28, verse 11, it says, now while they were going, behold, so this is while the women were leaving, because the women had left to go see Jesus, and Peter and John had left. So while they were going away from the from the tomb, behold, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all the things that had happened. What had happened? An angel showed up and knocked them all out and rolled the stone away. So he's reporting, guess what happened? When they had assembled with the elders and consulted together, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers, saying, tell them his disciples came at night and stole him away while we slept. Don't you say an angel showed up, because that would mean he rose from the dead. That would mean it's all connected to God. And we've been telling everybody the opposite. So people really want to hold on to their truths. They are desperate to hang on to, this is what I believe. Don't tell me anything happened differently. So I'm going to give you money to tell them that different thing, because I don't want to be embarrassed. Okay. So, and if this comes to the governor's ears, we will appease him and make you secure. The fact that you were knocked out, just say the disciple, even though you were Roman soldiers and these disciples are just fishermen, tell them the disciples came and just wiped you out. Really? You think the governor's going to believe that these fishermen came and wiped out Roman soldiers? Yes. Well, no, he's not going to believe that. But we'll appease him We'll make sure you don't lose your jobs. So just trust us. Okay. So they took the money and did as they were instructed. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. So people can have two different views about the same event. We were all there. We all saw it happen. But one story is that the disciples stole the body. And the other story is that an angel came and rolled the stone away. And two people can believe two different things, have two different stories about the same event. So this has been going on forever. Okay, Mark chapter 16, verse 12. So this is something else that happened. It says, and after that he appeared in another form to two of them as they walked and went into the country. And they went and told it to the rest, but they did not believe them either. So after he appears to Mary Magdalene, two people are walking in the country, just walking. And Jesus appears to the two of them. So let's read that because it's very important what he says to them, what happened afterwards, for us to get a really good understanding of what's going on. So in Luke chapter 24, Luke tells the whole story. What's important is that Luke was a researcher. Luke went and talked to several people, and he interviewed the Pharisees, he interviewed the fishermen, he interviewed the Roman soldiers, he interviewed all these people, and was fantastic and got the whole story. He's like a reporter, got all the story. So Luke's book is pretty comprehensive. John again writes, though, to fill in some missing blanks. Mark got everything from Peter. And so Peter's an eyewitness to everything. Peter saw everything, right? And so Mark tells Peter's perspective, which we'll get into because it's kind of funny, Peter's perspective and all this. So in Luke, though, it says, now behold, two of them were traveling that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem. So they've heard the reports. The women have come and said, but they don't know anything about Peter. So they've heard the reports. Oh, they've stolen the body. Some people are saying, oh, they rolled the stolen away. No one believes the women. No one has talked to Mary Magdalene yet, who's actually seen Jesus. They've only talked to the women who said, here's what the angel said. And they're, oh, why would angels appear to you? You're just women. Okay, why indeed? So, and they talked together of all these things which has happened. Luke 24, verse 14 now. So it was, this is verse 15, while they conversed and reasoned that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. So he's just walking with them. Hi, how are you? This is very important because please know that this is not the only time he did this. And so just know in your life, Jesus may just show up at a poker game. Hey, and okay, just know that he might do this. So he's just walking with them, but their eyes were restrained so that they did not know him. And he said to them, what kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad? Because they're sad because, oh no, they took his body. These crazy women said some angels were there, but probably just some drunk people. And the Roman soldiers were locked out, and we don't even know who took the body, and they're just sad. But they're telling the whole event, everything, right? They personally did not go to the tomb. They're just hearing all these stories, and it's making them sad. So then the one whose name was Cleopas. Now there's Clopas. This is Cleopas. This is not the same person. So Clopas is the name of James and John's daddy in certain translations. So this is not him. This is not even one of the 12 disciples. 12 apostles. That's why I was separating the apostles from the disciples. This is one of the 70 that followed Jesus around, but this is not one of the 11, the apostles. So they're hearing this news, and all the disciples of the 7 disciples, they all hear this. A lot of them are living together, and 3 or 4 in this house, and 5 and 10 in this house, and blah, blah, blah. Right? So they're all hearing this news, but they're sad, like, wow, they crucified him, and then they took the body. This is terrible. So they said to him, this is Cleopas, are you the only stranger in Jerusalem? And have you not known the things which have happened there in these days? Like, his crucifixion was a big deal. All of this was a big deal. The whole town was in an uproar. You did not know about this? And he said to them, what things? What are you talking about? This is Jesus. Jesus. Yeah. You don't know about the guy on the cross? Tell me. I'd love to know. So what things? So they said to him, the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty indeed in word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death, and they crucified him. So he's a mighty prophet. Again, they're not thinking he's God, because if they thought he was God, then they know, well, death can't keep him in the ground. That's not, if he's God, you can't kill God. They just think he's a mighty prophet, and because they're not understanding that unto us a child is born, his name should be Wonderful Counselor, and the government should be in his shoulders, and he should be called the Everlasting Father and the Prince of Peace. That didn't mean anything to them. They think the guy who's coming is just going to be a prophet like Moses. We know Moses is dead, so I guess this guy's dead. So you don't know about this? You haven't heard about this Jesus of Nazareth? Because then they delivered him to be crucified. But we, in verse 21, we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all of this, today is the third day since these things happened. I mean, this is the third day, and you haven't heard about it? So yes, and he goes on to say, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us. When they did not find the body, they came saying they had also seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb. So Peter and John went to the tomb, and they found it just as the women had said, but him they didn't see, and they didn't see no angels. So if the men didn't see it, it didn't happen, because that's how history is written. You know, if the women experienced it, we don't know about it. But if the men saw it, or the men didn't see it, so the men didn't see it, so what are we to think? Now, this is Jewish thinking. This is not God thinking. This is not Greek thinking. The Greeks had male gods and female gods that they worshipped, and the Greeks didn't have that same, it's all males, all got to be male. That's not their thinking. There's nowhere in the Bible where it says, only think this way, only men. God used women all over the Bible. But this is the Jewish mindset, right? Which will come in handy later when you understand why the Greeks had more female ministers and stuff like that, and the Jews did not. Not because the Bible, God didn't tell them not to do that, just their way of thinking. So here's an example of it. The women said, oh, there was angels, but the men went, they didn't see anything. So therefore, we're sad because we believe the men and not the women. So then, verse 25, he said to them, Jesus says to them, oh, foolish ones. He didn't say, show you right. The men didn't see it. It's foolish ones and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not the Christ, the anointed one, the Messiah, to have suffered these things and entered into his glory? Don't you know that all that's not supposed to happen? You don't understand what the prophets were saying? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, and again, they still think he's just a really smart guy who happens to be traveling with them. They don't know it's Jesus. They still don't know it's Jesus, but they think, oh, this guy's really smart. So beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. They don't know it's Jesus, but they think this man is really good. Then they drew near to the village where they were going, and he indicated that he would have gone farther, like, bye, I'm still going to keep going. And they said, no, whoever you are, you're really good. You need to come and stay, because you're saying some good stuff. And they constrained him, saying, abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent. So, and he went in to stay with them. Okay, I'll stay with you. You think what I've got to say is good. But they still don't know it's Jesus. Now it came to pass, verse 30, now it came to pass, and he sat at the table with them, so they're having dinner, that's what they do in the evening, that he took the bread and he blessed it. He didn't breast it. He blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. And he probably explained the same thing that he had done earlier. This is his body broken for you. This is the blood, right? He broke it and blessed it. It says, and then their eyes were opened and they knew him and he vanished from their sight. Which is fantastic, right? Oh, you found out. Bye. Gotta go. Your mom says hi. So, because that's what he does. So, and they said to one another, oh, did not our hearts burn within us while he talked with us on the road and while he opened the scriptures? Like, now they realize, wow, that was so good. I mean, they knew it was good before, but now, oh, that's why it was so good. That was actually Jesus talking about himself. Yes, all the scriptures talk about Jesus. Why were people arguing with Jesus? He wrote the scriptures. He was the inspiration for the scriptures. Jesus is God. And so yes, I know the scriptures really well. I was there when Moses was writing them. They talk about me. I was looking ahead to what I was going to do, and said it and to Moses. Well, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that. I said it to Isaiah, I said it to Jeremiah. So yeah, that's why I know the scriptures so well. I wrote them. Hello. I'm not just a prophet. I'm actual God. Just God inside of a flesh body. That's all. It's the only difference. Jesus is God. There's no difference. So they rose up that very early hour and returned to Jerusalem. So they had gone to Emmaus. They got 7 miles from Jerusalem. We got it. Oh my Lord, we just saw Jesus. Mary Magdalene had seen Jesus. Now they had seen Jesus. We'll find out later that the women also had seen Jesus. Oh, we know the women seen Jesus, but they hadn't got to tell them yet that they'd seen Jesus. They'd only told them about what the angel said. So they hadn't gotten back to the city to say, oh yes, and guess we saw Jesus too. Not that they would have believed him. Okay. So they woke up at that very hour, returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11, right? So these, even though he calls them disciples, they were part of the 70 disciples, not part of the 11 who we would call apostles. And those who were with them gathered together. So all the 11 are there mourning. Peter and John have gone to the tomb. They've seen the empty tomb. Didn't mean anything to them. John believed, but Peter's still sitting there sad. Now here's the best part. So those who were gathered together saying, the Lord is risen indeed, and he appeared to Simon Peter. He appeared to Peter. Now, Peter hadn't said anything to the rest of them that Jesus had appeared to him. Peter had not said anything to them. They're informing them of this. Jesus, once he's revealed who he was, he says, yes, I appeared to Mary Magdalene. I've appeared to, and Jesus is the one that told these two guys that he'd appeared to Peter. So they find the 11 sitting there. They're the ones informing. And by the way, he appeared to Peter. Why didn't Peter tell them? Why did Peter say, Jesus appeared to me? So there's a couple theories there. Because it says, and they told about the things that had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. Okay. But they're the ones that said, and he happened, and he's appeared to Peter. Peter hasn't said anything to you guys. Why would Peter be this way? So either Peter didn't believe it when Jesus appeared to him. You're not Jesus, you're just playing with me. Or he's so depressed, he still is embarrassed about how he denied Jesus. So Jesus appearing to him still has him depressed, didn't make him happy. He didn't go, oh, Jesus appeared. He's horrified because he's still in horror about what he did. Let's examine that. So this whole thing is focusing on Peter. I want to focus on Peter. What happened right before Jesus died? What happened after Jesus died? That Peter would be, and you can kind of decide for yourself which it is. Either Jesus appeared and says, you're not Jesus, get away from me. Or a bit of both. Or, oh, Jesus appeared and he's still mad at me. So I don't even want to tell these people. So let's remind ourselves. In Luke chapter 22, Peter has told everybody, if everyone else falls away, I will never deny you. I will be with at your side. He's chopped off the ear of somebody who showed up and tried to take Jesus away. But then they took Jesus away anyway. And then Peter, suddenly he wasn't Mr. I will chop off your guy anymore. He was just scared. In Luke chapter 22, verse 54, it says, having arrested him, they led him and brought him into the high priest's house. But Peter followed at a distance. Peter wasn't up. John is right there next to Jesus. John goes in to the high priest's house with Jesus. Peter stays outside. Peter is scared now. Now, when they had kindled a fire, this is Luke 22:55. When they had kindled a fire in the midst of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Didn't go over where Jesus was. Didn't go where the Pharisees was. He's with just the poor people sitting around in a fire in the courtyard. Okay. And a certain servant girl, so he's just with the servants, seeing him as he sat by the fire, looked intently at him and said, this man was also with him. But he denied him, saying, women, I don't know him, which is wrenching. Followed him for 3.5 years, invited him to his house. Jesus gets arrested. I don't even know who that is. Now, Peter is horrified at himself that he's doing this, but he can't stop himself because he's scared to death now. And after a little while, another saw him and said, you also are of them. But Peter said, man, I am not. Now, Jesus is just 20 feet away. Jesus can hear Peter. Okay. Then after about an hour had passed, another confidently affirmed, saying, surely this fellow also was with him, for he is Galilean. Remember, and Peter's trying to change his accent. No, I am not. But he said, dude, you're from Galilee. We know you. You can't disguise your accent. But Peter said, man, I do not know what you're saying. I do not speak that way. Yes, you do. And immediately, it says, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, because Jesus said, before the rooster crows, you'll have denied me 3 times. I just want you to know this. And Jesus kept saying, I'm telling you this so that when it happens, you don't freak out. I'm telling you in advance so that you'll know, I already knew you're going to do this. I'm not thinking, I can't believe Peter's doing. But that's what Peter's hearing in his head. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Because he's right there. Jesus is not in another city. He's 20 feet away. Peter denies him 3 times loudly, because Peter's getting loud, because you know he's loud. And the rooster crows, and Jesus turned and looked at Peter. And this is Luke's version. This is not in Mark's version. Again, Mark's version is what Peter dictated. Peter doesn't bring all this up in Mark's version. But Luke did research, tracked these people down. They know everything that happened, and they know that right when he denied him the 3rd time and the rooster crowed, Jesus looked right at him. But not to embarrass him, he looked at him like, see, I told you this was going to happen. Don't freak out. We freak out when something happens, and God's right with us saying, I knew this was going to happen. You're freaking out, but I knew all of this was going to happen. I got this. But we freak out like, oh no, like God's finding out for the first time. What's God going to do now? I'm giving him a headache. No, you're not. He already knew. So that's why he looked at Peter, not to embarrass him, but to say, I knew this, so calm down. But Peter can't calm down in his brain. So then Peter remembered the word of the Lord and how he had said to him, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So Peter went out and wept bitterly, as opposed to falling on his knees and saying, oh, this is so fantastic that Jesus already knew. He had boasted to everybody, I will never deny him. You're crazy, Jesus. I've already told you you're not going to Jerusalem. I told you you're not going to the cross. And I'm telling you I will not deny, because Peter liked to tell Jesus what was really going to happen, just like we do in prayer. And so now he's remembering, oh my God. And so he leaves and cries. Oh, Jesus is mad at me. Jesus is mad at me. So this is what's going through Peter's mind. So Jesus appeared to Peter on this way back. Peter does not say anything to anybody. So is that because he did not believe it was really Jesus? Or because he's so horrified, he still thinks Jesus is mad at him? And he doesn't tell anybody because, well, Jesus appeared to me. Oh, he wouldn't appear to you. You denied him. I don't know what, but he doesn't tell anyone. Jesus had to tell them. And by the way, bring up to everybody that I appeared to Peter because he's my guy. And they need to know that Peter eventually is going to take over the church. And that's why I appeared to Peter separately. So make sure that, because Peter's crazy. So they tell everybody. And he appeared to Peter. Peter still didn't say anything. Back to John chapter 20. Verse 19. So then that same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, so they still shut themselves in, Jesus came and stood in their midst and said to them, peace be with you. So after he appeared to Mary Magdalene and appeared to the women, then to the 2 disciples, but they weren't the apostles. Finally, after those 3 appearances, he appears to the 11, they're now called, right? He appears to them. And everybody else who was there. But the 11 hadn't seen him, just those 2 from the 70, right? First thing Jesus says is, peace be with you, because they're freaking out. Calm down, it's okay. He says, peace be with you. In Luke's version, it's the same thing. Now as they said these things, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and said to them, peace be to you. That's what everybody remembers. Here's Mark's version. Now remember, Mark got this from Peter. So this is how Peter remembers it. Later, he appeared, this is Mark chapter 16, verse 14. Later, he appeared to the 11 as they sat at the table, and he rebuked their unbelief and hardness of heart because they did not believe those who had seen him after he had risen. Now that's how Mark saw it. Well, that's not how Mark, that's how Peter saw it. John and Luke have him showing up and saying, peace be unto you. And Matthew, peace be unto you. When Mark tells it, he says he appears to them and he rebukes them for their unbelief and hardness of heart because they did not. And I'm thinking that's what Peter thought he heard. But that's not how other people remember it. Now, Jesus may have said, why did you not believe? They remember a calming presence. They remember Jesus being the one that calmed them down. Peter remembers him being rebuked for their unbelief, because maybe Jesus did say, why did you not believe? But in Peter's mind, that was a rebuke, and they were hardness of heart, because that's how he's feeling. And don't forget, Jesus had already appeared to Peter. He didn't tell anybody. And when he shows up again, he tells Mark, and then he rebuked us for our unbelief, because that's how he's feeling. Like, Jesus is mad at me. He's mad at me. And I didn't believe. And Jesus says, no, I knew this. But we're this way. Jesus is saying, I knew in advance, please come to me. I knew in advance you were going to sin. I knew in advance you were going to mess up. I knew in advance that bad thing was going to happen. Come to me, please. Don't freak out. We go, no, God is mad at me. How can I tell God I'm going to get drunk somewhere because God is mad at me? No, he's not. No, he's not. No, he's not. So, but that's what we hear. That's what we hear. In John chapter 21, I'm going to skip ahead because I just want to examine how Peter is looking at these things. So in John chapter 21, verse 3, just remember that Jesus showed up a couple times and kept saying, go to Galilee, go to Galilee. They finally go to Galilee. When they get to Galilee, in John chapter 21, verse 3, it says, Simon Peter said to them, well, I'm going fishing. So they said to him, okay, we'll go with you also. And they went out, immediately got into a boat, and that night they caught nothing. Now, in Galilee was the Mount of Transfiguration. On the Mount of Transfiguration, which is where they eventually meet Jesus on that mountain, because that's where he told them to go. After I'm resurrected, then you'll know why I said, don't tell anybody what happened to Mount Transfiguration until after I'm resurrected, because I'm giving you a preview of my resurrected body, just so you'll already know in advance. And if you recall, on that mountain, Peter said, let's build 3 tabernacles, one to Moses and one to Elijah and one to Jesus. And the voice came from heaven saying, no, this is my beloved son, hear him. Don't you build nothing, nobody else. Now, people made fun of Peter for that. And they have it in their other books where Peter specifically rebuked. In Mark's book, Peter is not specifically rebuked in that book. And when Peter later tells about what happened on the Mount of Transfiguration, he then says, no word from God is a private interpretation, meaning he wasn't just talking to me. That was for everybody. He was telling everybody, don't build 3 tabernacles, just build one. Well, no, Peter, he was saying that to you because you're the one who said it. Nobody else said that. But then when you told Mark, you didn't say to Mark who had said it, but everybody else said it was Peter. And it's fine. God's not mad about that. Peter's thinking, God's still mad at me about that. So he doesn't even want to go to the mountain. He doesn't even want to go to the Mountain Transfiguration because he's still thinking Jesus is mad at him. Instead, he says, let's just go fishing. Shouldn't we go to where Jesus... No, I'm just going to go fishing. In verse 6 of John chapter 21, it says, so this man appears on the shore, and he says to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some fish. Because he says, have you caught anything? No, we haven't caught anything. To them, it's just some man. They still don't recognize that it's Jesus. So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Oh my goodness, this man told us to cast it on the side of... You think that Peter would recognize. Peter did not. I want to go to Luke, where this happened the first time, when they first met Jesus, and they don't know who he is. In Luke chapter 5, verse 3, says, then he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's. He got into Peter's boat on purpose, because he knows what's going to happen way in the future. And he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down, and he taught the multitudes from the boat. And Peter's just thinking, there's some guy in my boat. And when he had stopped speaking, he says to Simon Peter, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. Very same words. He says it just to Simon Peter. Says it just to him. Luke took notes and took research. He didn't say to anybody else. Says it to him. But Simon answered him and said, Master, why does Peter always love to argue with Jesus? Master, we have toiled all night. And he doesn't know these Jesus. He's just saying, Master, like teacher. You're clearly a great teacher. I'm just a fisherman. But dude, we have toiled all night and caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net just because I don't want to sit and argue with you. So, okay. And then it was filled and they brought all these fish in. And then he said, oh, I need to follow you. I guess you know what you're talking about. So when Jesus says the very same thing, let down your net, and then suddenly it's full of fish, does Peter go, oh my goodness, it's Jesus? No. In John chapter 21, verse 7, it says, therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. Now when Simon people heard that it was the Lord, because they didn't recognize him, because he's not really paying attention, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and he plunged into the sea. This is an odd reaction. Oh my God, it's Jesus. And again, I don't know why he put on his robes and plunged into the sea. So they go to the shore. We'll see when we study this in a couple of weeks. They go to the shore. Peter swims separate from them because he's just embarrassed to be with. Why didn't you stay in the boat with your friends? Why didn't you tell them that Jesus spoke? They're all going to make fun of me. They're going to make fun of me. This is where this whole thing with Peter and John happens. And what about him? And what about John? Because Peter thinks he's being yelled at this whole time by Jesus. And Jesus is like, I'm not yelling at you. Just calm down. You're the one making this big deal out of this thing. So, John chapter 20, verse 20, he shows up and says, peace be unto you. This is the second time Peter has seen him. And it says, and when he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were glad when they realized, wow, this really is Jesus. So I'm ending there. But so just to recap, Mary Magdalene goes, sees the empty tomb, runs back and tells the disciples. Peter and John show up. They don't see any angels. The women go in, they see angels, they don't see any angels. So Peter and John leave separately. John believes Peter does not. Apparently somewhere, Jesus showed up to Peter. Now he showed up to Mary Magdalene. She didn't recognize him at first, so that's not weird that Peter wouldn't recognize him. Clearly, they just didn't, halfway they weren't expecting to see him walking around, just like you're not expecting to see your great-grandfather just walking around. So you wouldn't recognize him right at first. But even then, it's just hard to believe. But he showed up to Peter at some point. Peter went back and did not tell anyone. So he goes to the people at Emmaus, and Jesus knows that Peter didn't tell anybody. So he shows up to these two apostles. He's still giving the disciples a chance to believe and recall what he said, and because he doesn't want to keep showing up every time they have to do something. He wants them to recall all the words that he said and put them into action, just like he wants us to do it. Jesus doesn't want to need to show up. Yes, go ahead and brush your teeth. Boom, I'm out. Yes, go ahead and wear the red sweater. Boom, I'm out. Yes, go. No. Yes, you put $5 in the offering. Boom, and he's out. So he wants us to read his word, take it into our hearts, and believe that we're being led by the Spirit inside of us, which is where they are right now, as opposed to him having to show up every 5 minutes. So he didn't show up right away for them because he'd been instructing them for 3.5 years. Please call him what I told you for 3.5 years. So he had to jumpstart them, right? But Peter, he had to show up separately to Peter to let him know, I'm not mad at you. Get over it. I know that you're a mess. I don't care. You are loud. You jump into things. And these are all the reasons I'm going to use you. So the stuff that we think is disqualifying in our lives. Yeah, but I'm shy, she's like, I know, and I'm still going to use you, Moses. I know you're shy. I'm still going to use you, Jonah. I know you don't want to do it. I'm still going to use you, David, and you're a mess. I'm still going to use you. I know your flaws. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to say yes. Just say yes. Okay, I'll use you. Okay, now I'll do the rest. So he had to appear separately to Peter to let him know he'd forgiven him, and Peter is still struggling with it. Struggling with it even in Galilee. He was struggling with it in the boat, struggling with it. He's struggling with it. You'll see on the shore. When he gets there, he's still struggling. How could Jesus forgive me? Because I died for everybody's sins. So your unbelief, your doubt doesn't stop. But I doubted Jesus once. But I doubted him 6 times. So whatever, Jesus is like, please get over your stuff and just say yes. I will use you. I forgive you. I get you. I don't expect you to be perfect. I created you. I know. I'm not like, what? You're still getting over that? You're doing that to other people. What? It's taking you so long. I'm not saying that to you. And you're saying that to yourself. What's taking me so long? I am patient with you. I love you. I forgive you. Just keep coming to me. Just keep coming to me. That's our lesson for tonight. Okay, so I'm going to shut up, and I'll see some of you on Sunday, where I'm in the book of Exodus, and the Levites have just killed 3,000 people. And then next week we'll continue with chapter 20 and how they respond, because then we have to attack Thomas and his reaction and all the Thomases of the world. So they're the Mary Magdalenes of the world, the Peters of the world, the Johns of the world. All these are real people in the Bible having real reactions. The only person who's perfect in the Bible is Jesus. But all the rest of them are a mess, just like we are. And yet, look how they turn the world upside down. Okay, so the rest of you, I will see you next week. Again, I appreciate you tuning in. Yes, save. What did I do? Yes, save. Okay. And thank you so much. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.